So besides volunteering to make our student speakers look good today, I'm here to speak, as you heard the topic, about why it's more important than ever to teach about race. I'm going to focus, though, on the how. Before I get started, I just want to provide a warning to everyone. I'm going to be referencing a well-known hate group that operates in the United States. So let's go to Needham, Massachusetts, a sleepy suburb of Boston. The year's 2004, it's October, and I've just driven into school. It's my very first year as the high school principal. And there are a group of students waiting for me. Now, in my position as high school principal, whenever somebody is waiting for you at your office when you show up, they are usually not there to tell you how awesome you are and what a great job you're doing. They were a group of Metco students. Now, Metco is basically the Boston busing program, where hundreds of students from inner city neighborhoods across Boston literally get onto buses and come into the suburbs for access to high quality education. A very controversial and long-standing program, but these students are incredibly important to our community. What are you going to do about this, Mr. Richards? A student reaches out with a whole bunch of leaflets. They were leaflets from the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, the KKK. And there were dozens of them all across the school. Now, you probably know the KKK through your study of U.S. history and the terror that they've reigned all across the U.S. Over the years, from after the Civil War into the Civil Rights Movement. And you may know that they're actually, unfortunately, still active today. You might see them at marches. And you may or may not know that one of their strategies of spreading their hate speech is through canvassing, where they basically spam a community with their literature. And that appears to what happened in Needham. So I placated the students, got them back to class, said I'm going to get right on top of it. And I was thinking to myself, oh no. I can assure you those weren't the exact words I used. And I was definitely thinking they did not cover this in graduate school. So we launched an investigation, as you might do, and we discovered something quite shocking, in fact. The KKK did not, in fact, canvass Needham High School. One of our very own Metco students had found an actual flyer somewhere outside the community, brought it into school, used our copiers, made dozens of copies, and spread them all across the school, and reserved a few to take up to the brand new high school principal. You can imagine how shocked, angry, upset, distraught we were, really hurt. So we started thinking about consequences, as one might do. In fact, this is likely what have happened years after years after years at a place like Needham High School. And these are likely what these students were used to if this sort of behavior had happened. But as we contemplated, we first wanted to ask them why. Why did you do this? Why did you disrupt this school? Why did you cause such embarrassment in the press to this community? And I'll never forget this. A young woman of color, Shayna, she said, Mr. Richards, this school for years has ignored our lived experience. They've ignored the challenges we face coming from our communities into this nearly entirely white community of Needham. These flyers were a wake-up call to you. Okay, not the response I expected. And I worked hard not to become defensive, not to say, Shayna, there are 100 different ways that you can get your voice heard without this sort of disruption. Or, look, I'm in my second month as a high school principal. Can you just give me a little bit of time? So we found ourselves at a crossroads. It still would have been much easier to punish. But, you know, the Latin root for the word discipline means to teach. And to teach this lesson through punishment made us feel like hypocrites. So we instead chose to listen. We chose to learn from the students. In fact, we didn't punish at all. We launched a comprehensive anti-bias campaign across the school to create a new chapter in Needham High School. We created affinity groups for students. We created opportunities to talk, to listen. We had students talking to students, students talking to teachers. We had trainers coming in. We even tapped into the district's efforts to close the achievement gap. And we made a real difference. When it is hardest to do so, we must listen, for it's our greatest chance for peace and happiness. So in 2009, we left Needham. In fact, we left the United States altogether to raise our children overseas. First, we went to London, then we went to Saudi Arabia, and now here we are in Dubai. And I wanted to keep the passion that I had for social justice, so I developed a course for high school students, taught from the ally perspective on topics of race and culture. I taught 3 versions of it in London, 2 versions in Saudi Arabia, and this coming fall, I'll offer the latest version here at the American School of Dubai. Now, when I first offered the course in London, we needed to start with the question, are we post-racial? Or is race just a thing of the past? Now remember, President Obama had just been elected, and there was this feeling that it's a major milestone here. Even though, if you were paying attention, there were examples all through the press of racial insensitivities in sports or ethnic conflicts in faraway places. But it was a legitimate question to have and to pose. And then a few years later, the powder keg exploded. Trayvon Martin in Florida, Michael Brown in the riots of Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner in New York City. And then in 2016, Trump was elected, and the xenophobes came out of the swamp, and race politics are now front and center. The wall, the travel ban, and DACA. So I ask you, again, are we post-racial? Is race just a thing of the past? Perhaps not. And here we are again at that crossroads. And I believe, again, it's time to listen. It's time to learn. But you know, this is not listening. These are actually police officers, not soldiers. Nor is this listening, violence against police. When it is hardest to do so, we must listen, for that's our greatest chance for peace and for happiness. Why do we listen? We listen so that we can validate the differences among us, so nobody becomes invisible. We listen to appreciate culture, what explorer Wade Davis calls humanity's greatest legacy. We listen so that we can respond to conflict rather than react. We listen so we don't miss the incredible messages in this powerful social movements that we see today. What an incredible age we live in. So I'll leave you today with an acronym. We listen so that we can learn. We listen through inquiry by asking questions to understand. We're able to listen only when we stop talking. When we listen, we gain empathy. We understand the perspective of others. And when we listen, we negate ignorance, bias, prejudice, and hate. So, join me today in launching #Listen. Thank you very much.